Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here again. I'm not sure how many of those 15 we've been here for, but I think quite a lot of them, probably them all. As Steve says, I'm here to talk to you about how US studios can maximize content revenues without cannibalizing their D2C offers, or as I like to call it, have your cake and eat it. A much simpler way of putting it. I thought I would address this question by looking at what the studios had been doing in 2024. That gives me an opportunity to do quite a few things and address the question, but it's also interesting because more through fortune than planning, I looked ahead at the agenda only after I'd put together my presentation. And fortunately, kind of what's great is I'm going to take a very fast look at a whole bunch of areas that you're going to be able to sort of dive into a lot more deeply with some of the other presenters and panelists and people here today, which is a really great group of guests. The first most obvious thing to say is that streamers, and as part of those streamers I include some of the studios, they continue to walk that fine balance, chasing subscribers whilst also looking for to improve their P&L and their profitability, something that's been a common theme of discussion since the second quarter of 2022. And that's not necessarily an easy thing to do. And as a kind of one of the, there's a number of ways you can improve profitability, but one of those is, unfortunately, the less glamorous cutting costs thing. As you can see here on the left-hand side, that is the new season scripted premieres in the US. Looking at all forms of commissioner, people who make shows and premiere new season shows in the US. And you can see the significant drop in the last TV season. And that drop is across all types of commissioners. So it's not just the studio SVOD services who took a pretty big drop from 52 premieres to 38. Sorry, 35. My glasses haven't got them on. But everyone, including kind of the global streamers, which in that case includes Netflix and Amazon. Also Apple. But on the right-hand side, you could see if you just drill down just into kind of the digital originals from these, which includes very much the studios in that black bar, you can see the significant drop-off. So that includes specifically and very much so kind of the Warner Brother business Max, HBO Max, and also Disney Plus, who both decided last year they could get away with making and premiering less originals on their SVOD service and still make that D2C service work. But we'll come back to kind of some of the areas of program and getting into more detail. But also in terms of making programs, the other thing they've been doing is arguably playing it safe. You can see a significant drop-off but by the US producers in terms of how they are, where they are kind of sourcing their content from. So really, the one to look at is the black, and you can see the fall-off in original concepts in terms of the shows that they are making. You can see kind of what has been growing is actually literary adaptations, but you see a kind of a big chunk of kind of film and TV reboots that you will be familiar with one way or another. And in other, you've got a whole wide variety of areas, including things like podcasts. But it's the drop-off in the original concepts that's the important thing, kind of that's been different. From a movie point of view, we could spend a lot of time talking about movies, but kind of at its simplest, last year they were very much going through the windows, taking those movies kind of through from theatrical through to home end, so releasing it either as kind of a transactional video on demand or electronic sell-through, sometimes a premium VOD window, sometimes in just a regular transactional VOD window. And then on to pay one windows, and then on to pay two. We could kind of add those to the chart. Beneath this is the issue we'll start talking about a bit with TV, which is where some of these pay one releases, like 100% of these premieres go on Disney Plus, less so with the others. But nonetheless, they then go to a pay two and then go beyond that as well. Also coming into advertising. So as I think other people will spend a lot of time talking about this market. I won't spend a huge amount, but suffice to say they've been very focused on growing their ad tier. That's significant for lots of reasons. It's significant, but I'll just skip past the really significant things to do with the advertising economy and talk about the other thing, which is that kind of what it also enables them to do is have a product with a lower, theoretically, a lower wholesale cost. So the implications that might have for what they can then do in terms of bundling their product are significant, and we'll come back to that. Sports. Everybody here, it's probably a lot of people I know have been in the pay TV industry for years, knows that sport can help with subscriber additions. Last year, we saw a significant shift in streamers. That included, it wasn't just Netflix who've sort of stopped messing around with sport in terms of the fake sport things they were doing and the entertainment they were doing, and actually kind of doubling down and kind of buying sports rights. But also we've seen kind of Disney showing football in global markets. We've seen Paramount doing the same. We've seen all forms of streamers doing more with sport. Very much on a kind of event, small, occasional basis for a lot of them. And I don't personally believe kind of any of them are trying to attempt in any way to become the Netflix of sport, but they are increasingly recognizing the value of sport and what it can do for them in terms of driving subs for their business. Bundling. Now, I know there's quite a few sessions on this today, which I'm looking forward to seeing. But first of all, from a pay TV operator point of view, last year they were very much deepening, broadening their relationships with those pay TV operators. We've seen kind of relaunches. We've seen sort of, we've seen Sky, Showtime sort of take over the Ziggo kind of movies and series XL tier. We've seen sort of Paramount kind of appear as a content hub in places. We've seen Paramount go deeper into packs. They went deeper into the Canal Plus pack being available in basic. And we've seen them get kind of deeper and deeper and more integrated. We've also seen more innovative bundles. I didn't spend a huge time finding up all the different varieties, because there are a lot of different sorts of interesting bundles going on. There's the SVOD bundles, so that's sort of SVOD to SVOD bundles. There's kind of, and it's not just about bundles, about promotion. There's things like kind of Rings of Power, the Amazon show that went on Samsung TV Plus as a first season when the second season was launching on Amazon. We've seen kind of Apple appear on Prime Video channels. We've seen Roku promoting Apple TV content, offering it for free. And I think the one that really is the most interesting for me, that probably will come up a bit in the context of the OS wars, is we've seen kind of Vizio in the US putting together bundles for their account holders. So people who have a Vizio TV account in the US can take advantage of different bundles and different services, in particular the Stars and AMC bundle that came out. But just to focus a little bit on really kind of the precise point of how the studios are have moved very clearly to an economy of selling content to third parties as well as operating their D2C services. We put this up last year as well, and kind of we update it quite regularly, but you can see quite clearly last year in terms of the number of their premieres that in these global markets that we've tracked, that's taken a slight drop down to kind of 60% of the premieres in those markets were on their owned services in the first window. 40% were sold to third parties. That's down from 64% in 23. And you can see they kind of shot up as they rolled out D2C, launched in more markets. But now they've kind of reached a, well, let's see where that goes. We've kind of, I would expect it personally to go down a little bit, but we've reached sort of a situation where kind of from a first window point of view, maybe they've reached their share. And that content is going to a wide variety of places, but last year probably the most distinctively kind of different thing that you could isolate was that, for two reasons. One is they're back in the game of acquiring content, but the other is the studios were selling Netflix content in the second window. So you can see the significant kind of jump kind of season on season of Netflix buys. Also, I mean, Amazon were always a bit more of a mixed picture, but also with Amazon as well. So those are kind of premieres on kind of that they sold on a single market basis in the second window. And second windows themselves has been a really interesting space last year, and it reflects kind of one of the activities the studios are doing to try and monetize the content, but there's also library. As you can see, this isn't our data, this is Nielsen's data. It just shows kind of top acquired shows throughout the year, kind of lots of library. It can still do really, really well. And also, the other thing it shows on two sides of the equation is that in a second window terms, they're also selling a lot more content, and a lot of you will see this in your own hometowns, to broadcaster-based VOD services. If you're in the UK, you'll see lots of US content popping up on ITVX, also on iPlayer, but also on BBC, France, on M6, Canada, CBC Gem. There's lots of different services, and that's it shows kind of a significant change by the studios, but it also shows a kind of a focus from the broadcasters on doing this. And you can see I just threw up a table for Disney, just showing, so this is all Disney's second windows in these markets last year, and over 60% of them were to free TV. So that's them, in terms of monetizing their content, they see an opportunity for particular types of content once it's been on Disney, in some cases before it's been on Disney Plus, to sell it to free TV. Finally, I had to mention FAST. I think there's probably a whole other session on kind of what people are doing and what studios are doing in FAST. But suffice to say, all this does is represent kind of studio-owned FAST channels in these markets. I really should have taken Paramount off. I think everyone knows kind of Pluto is Paramount's business, so the Paramount number is huge and distorts. But what this really shows to me is that the studios are stepping in relatively carefully and quietly into the FAST world, not doing a huge amount. A lot of these services are kind of archive catalogue kind of remnant content. Not all of it. They are doing some interesting things, but they are treading slowly into the market. Outside of the US, I should stress. That's it for me. So I kind of tried to sum it up in 5, kind of advertising, kind of focusing on their kind of hybrid advertising tiers, a little bit of exploring FAST, content sales, working much harder, trying to find that right balance, sports, kind of selectively, kind of doing it, but growing, driving new additions. And it's partnerships and windowing that's where the real kind of complicated kind of maximising those revenues comes. It's taking that massively fragmented market, finding all the different places they can put their content in, all the different types of relationships they need to do to make those deals work, and maximising their revenues. That means sometimes selling things in more windows, sometimes co-exclusivity, sometimes non-exclusive, sometimes in a different order. And that way, I'll leave it on my last slide, so if you do want those slides, you can get them off the code there. That's how they do it. So that's it from me.